Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight for Soul School. Jeff, it's so good to see you, darling.
You as well. You
Is
as
it
well.
chilly? Is it chilly? You got a nice warm
It
snuggie on.
it is chilly. Yes, it is. It's like I think I can see my breath. I don't know if you can see it, but I can see my breath back here. So
Okay, all right. God invented these things called space heaters.
well, you know what? Like I'm the typical dad who fights tooth and nail. I'm gonna wait to the very last minute before I crank that furnace back on to save as much money as I can. I finally buckled under the pressure the other day and had to turn it on. But back here in my little office area, it's a little extension of the house. It's kind of like a 4 or 3 seasons room, whatever they're called.
Mhm.
That they never quite finished, but it's actually beautiful back here. But one of the parts that is not finished is that it does not have heat, or air, so that all has to be, plugged into the wall. And I've just yet to do that yet because again, saving on that electricity bill. So I just will bundle up for the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, yeah. Bless your heart. I have an
Yes.
uncle up in Rhode Island that will absolutely not turn the heat on in his house until November 30th. I don't know why he chose that particular date, but it's Rhode Island. Are
Yeah.
you insane?
We
You
all
know,
tell ourselves as young men we won't become that old man, but
yeah,
there's something that just happens at some point in your life. You become that old man and you hate it, but you
not
just
me.
become it. No.
Not me. I can't walk by that thermostat without turning it up a notch.
Yeah.
Boom.
Well, I got the Nest this time around, so I can set it all from my phone. So when everyone's changing it during the day, I can be like, no, and turn it back down.
That's wrong. See, now
So
you're paying to have that ability to freeze your family to death,
it is a little,
right?
yeah, I know. Yeah,
Okay,
you're
all
right.
right.
You're right.
That's all I have to say about
I
that.
receive
All
your criticism and I will apply
right.
it.
Okay, well, crazy week.
Yeah.
Just chalk it up to another crazy week. I don't know what to say other than, oh my God.
Hmm.
Uh, so class is in session, but then again, of course, class is always in session. And this is just, the soul school period that everybody comes to with their little notes and their apples and
Mhm.
their bright, wide eyes because they can't imagine what we're going to say next. Um, okay, so let me tell you what happened this week, Jeff, because I really haven't had a chance to communicate with you. Well, let me go back a little bit. Uh, and you know some about this. There's this young uh, couple of guys, Colby and Sam and Colby, that do YouTube videos. And apparently they're all the rage with the kids. I know some adults watch them also, but they are, in a way, they're like the breakthrough people who are very young and young at heart,
Mhm.
who do paranormal things because they think it's really cool and they're always, looking to learn more. I did an interview with them from the farm over Halloween week. A series of they spent a week at the farm several months ago, and over Halloween week they released a series of videos. And I believe your daughter saw one of them, or
Yeah, my youngest. Yep, she did.
yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. Um, and in a kind of sick, twisted, strange way, what should have been wonderful and informative and uplifting and enlightening turned into this horrific, vitriolic attack on two of my closest friends,
Mhm.
Cody and Satori. Now, I can say that what Cody and Satori do is absolutely real. They're not the only ones on earth that do it. It's how do you pneumatics, pneumatics. It's a use of energy, channeling energy.
Yeah.
Pneumatics. They are pneumatics.
Yes. Yeah.
Um, Now, the reason that word exists is because what they do, it's right here, right there, what they do exists.
Mm-hmm.
And it is that rare and precious glimpse into the realm from which we come and will all inevitably return. And it is an opportunity, and it's the opportunity of a lifetime to have the experience of doing a session, even a single session with Cody and Satori. They stumbled across this quite by accident several years ago, just before the pandemic hit, just as had gotten together as a couple and were just holding hands. And suddenly this strange rapping and tapping started coming from everywhere around them. And when they break the physical link, it stops. And when they touch again and they hold each other's arms, usually like that, it happens again. And they have developed a system, a method, which is slow and tedious, takes a little time to do it, but very succinct messages come through from spirits who identify themselves, let you know when they died, when they were born, what they died from. Um, this happens everywhere they go. They're paranormal investigators. They've been all over the country. It's not like it just happens at the farmhouse, far from it. It happens everywhere. They go, and as soon as they connect and they are approached by spirit, inevitably that spirit is trying to come through to give a message to someone that is in their proximity. So it's not like just the spirits from the house come through just to talk to Jacqueline or the staff. It's not like that. And in fact, I know several people who are in the upper echelon, in the pinnacle of the paranormal, that are blown away by this. They've never seen anything like it. And it has all but rendered obsolete Spirit Box, Echo Box, Pandora's Box, EVPs, all of that. I mean, it is that groundbreaking and that phenomenal.
Yeah.
A process that they use. And I've experienced it. I don't know how many times I've experienced it in their presence. It's one thing to watch it on video. It's
Yeah.
another thing to experience it in person and not be able to discern where those sounds are coming from. But clearly someone is communicating with them. And have even Abigail Arnold came through and identified her date of birth, her date of death, and what she died from. Meanwhile, Jacqueline's sitting on the Parsons bench behind the sofa, plugging all the numbers into Ancestry.com, and all of a sudden, with delight on her face, turns and says, "Everyone meet Abigail Arnold." A photograph of her in Ancestry.
Wow.
Okay, that's Mrs. John Arnold. She and John are still very active at the farm, very much a part of what happens at the farm. Both of them very loving, giving spirits who probably were the ones behind the message that came to me last summer, which was, "We miss your family." Okay, wow. Well, here's what happened, Jeff. About 90% of the comments were fabulous, absolutely fabulous. And about 10% of them, maybe a little more, were as degrading, as belittling, as just sadistic personal attacks on our friends, ridiculing them in every conceivable way, making personal attacks on them, making videos to prove that what they're doing is a fraud. I guess I should be grateful that only 10% of the population is is that like so closed and so cynical and
Yeah.
so mean-spirited that they would even bother to go after them the way that they have. But what they've done has been incredibly hurtful. Now, I suppose knowing that makes some of them happy, because you and I both know there are people in this world who don't feel tall unless they are standing on the broken bodies of their victims.
Yep.
And as I've said many times, they can't have a crisis of conscience if they don't have a conscience.
Mm-hmm.
But, you know, when we did our show the other night, I compared what they're doing to the desecration of Bathsheba Sherman's gravestone that stood there since 1885 next to her 4 children and her husband, until a film called Conjuring came out, which is 95% fiction. And somebody went into the Riverside Cemetery and desecrated her gravestone, decimated her burial spot. It's been fixed twice. I don't think they can fix it again. This just keeps happening over and over again, based on a movie that's supposedly based on a true story, which is based on the Warrens' case file rendition of the true story. And I will say to them tonight what I said in our special episode of A World Awakening, which will air in our spot next Friday night. I know that spirit exists. I know that. Not something I have to be convinced of. It's why I don't do investigations. I'm looking for something I already know exists. What's the point of that? Kind of a waste of time. But I believe in karma. And I believe that what you put out in the world will come back to you tenfold at least. And what we put out comes back either to heal us, or to grace us, or to bless us, or to haunt us. And so I would encourage everyone that is watching this show tonight to ramp up the whole mindset of kindness counts. And I want to talk about what part of us, and I think sadly, a lot of this vitriolic, contemptible commentary is coming from their own peer group. I could be wrong about that. It could be older people. And, if it is, and they've lived long enough to see things that maybe shake or even fracture their belief systems, then good. You've lived long enough to get shaken up a little bit in this miraculous thing we call life. But if it's coming from their peer group, it breaks my heart. Because I would like to think that the youngsters among us are the ones who are most open-minded, who would stand up for people their own age, who are trying to bring something remarkable and wondrous into the world. They don't charge anybody to do this. They've never made a dime doing this. Not a dime. And, the accusations, the false accusations being flung at them, calling them frauds and shysters and snake oil salesmen, it's all bullshit. And it makes me very angry. And I try really hard to not respond in kind. I won't even look at anything I know about what's been put out there. I haven't seen any of it. I haven't looked at any of it. I don't read reviews. I don't read commentary on YouTube. I don't any of it. Not the good, the bad, the ugly, the horrific. I don't. Because I'm not willing to pollute my own consciousness with hateful, vitriolic speech. And words are weapons. Words are used to declare wars. And I can't really place this kind of aggressiveness that's coming from a small portion of the population that are into these videos and watching these videos, but it seems to me that if they're watching anything that has to do with paranormal, they've at least bought in somewhat to the notion that spirit exists. And so I guess I don't understand why that element of human decency doesn't exist in these people.
Mhm.
And I wonder if it can be nurtured. I wonder if there's some way to reintroduce people through meditation, through conversation, if there's some way to let people start thinking in terms of what empathy means. Like, are you even capable of
Mhm.
putting yourself into the shoes of another,
Mhm.
walking their path for a mile?
Yeah.
One of the things that I think that is so fascinating, and I started doing some research on this when all this hell broke loose, and it has been hell for them. It's been,
Mm.
their feelings are so hurt. They're just two of the most gentle, kind, loving, generous human beings I've ever known. If I had had children, I would want them to be my children. Okay. I've
Mhm.
known them since they were in their mid-teens, early and mid-teens, both of them. I've watched them grow up into these extraordinary adults. They didn't even tell me until maybe a little over a year ago, maybe a year and a half ago, what they were doing, how it
Mhm.
was happening. And in fact, Ken DaCosta is the one who brought it to my attention by sending me a video of something that they did, not at the farm, but at a Freemasons lodge that they were in, I believe, somewhere in Massachusetts. And a gentleman came through that had died just a couple of months before. And he gave them his full name, his date of birth, his date of death, told them that he had been a fireman, gave them the name of his wife, Margaret, and asked somebody to please reach out to her and tell her that he loves her.
Mhm.
I mean, it's the kind of stuff that just knocks you back in your chair.
Yeah.
It's so beautiful, so loving. And that's how they are. And everything that they do is to bring enlightenment into the world. That's all they do.
Yeah.
Um, and so, yes, I feel very defensive about them. And I feel like, when somebody's down, when somebody's hurt and you love them, it hurts you too. I know I'm
Mhm.
speaking for you. I know I am.
Mhm.
Um, and if you're gonna stand up for your friends, isn't the best time to do it when they need you most?
Yeah.
They never asked. I pulled together about 10 people who I know have experienced what they do in their presence. And we put together a remarkable show the
Mm.
other night, and it will air in place of Soul School, and will air. It's 2 hours back to back, no commercial breaks, next Friday night. So I just wanted to let everybody know that. And I think it's worthwhile visiting, but I want to talk to you about specifically about empathy and what has happened in our society specifically
Mm.
that seems to have stomped on that human emotion to the point where it's gasping for air.
Yeah.
Why some of us feel it so profoundly all the time. The whole phrase, I'm an empath, I'm an empath. It's like, get out of her way. She's going to be picking up your energy like crazy, and
Mhm.
I get that. I do, because I can't help but pick up on other people's feelings and their thoughts, and kind of get merged in with them, and really have a true sense of who they are.
Mhm.
Um, but that element of our humanity seems to be missing, like absent
Yeah.
from Soul School,
Mm.
just absent, like, playing hooky someplace, like not getting it at all.
Mm.
And I just wonder what you think about this. And what we can do, what little bit we can do with our darling little show
Yeah.
and everybody that we do speak to help foster and nurture that in our youngsters, and let them not become cynical and jaded and, skeptical beyond measure, where they can't let any of the magic in.
Mm.
They just can't even let it in. They just refuse to believe that it even exists. And so go on the attack to
Yeah.
two of the least deserving people that walk this planet.
Yeah.
It breaks my heart. It wounds my spirit.
Mm.
And it darkens my soul to know what they're going through right now, and do whatever that we can to help lift them up.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I will say this, I'll get onto the empathy thing, but speaking more specifically to this situation too, I've known who they are and I've known of the work they do, really mostly through you. I've not met them. I would love to meet them one day.
You
That would be
will.
a great honor. Yeah.
You will.
But the first time I ever actually saw them do what they do was actually on the episode in question. My daughter, who is apparently a fan of this Sam and Colby show, I had no idea, because our kids have
Me
these
either,
magical
until
little
I got a
portals.
call.
Yeah, they have these little magic portals to the universe where they access all sorts of things we don't realize they access. Anyways, I mean, but for the most part, it seems like a harmless show. But she came running down the stairs being like, "Dad, Andrea's on the show." And of course, she knows that we're friends and we do a show together. And I was like, "Yeah, see, I told you your dad was cool." But anyways,
Play the cool card every single time.
always. But anyways, we started watching that episode and I was like, "Oh, I know of these people. I've never seen them do what they do, though." And we watched it, and we were all in awe. We were in tears. I mean, watching it, and it wasn't even. It was, of course, the miraculous nature of what was happening, but really for me, it was the sweetness of their spirits. Because so
Yes.
many,
Yeah.
and I mean no offense to anybody, but you watch enough paranormal shows and stuff like that. After a while, you kind of don't want to see anymore because people kind of go in with this cocksure attitude and they're trying to agitate things and stir things up. And you're like,
I hate that.
it's like, why don't you just be compassionate? How would you like it if someone came in your house and just started barking orders at you, asking you to turn this on or do that? It's like, they're just, just have a little compassion. Just because they're not on this plane in the same way that you are, they're not manifesting in the same density that you're manifesting in,
And
doesn't mean they're not
respect.
human beings. Yes.
It
And
was their house first.
Exactly.
Respect that.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I was like, that's key to what they do. It's just simply the sweetness of their spirits, the respect with which they do what they do. I was so blown away just simply by that. And that alone won me over. And actually, when I was seeing them do what they do, immediately, call it God, call it intuition, I knew people are going to accuse them of using the same method that the Fox sisters were accused of using. I knew, just the exact wording came to me. I was like, I knew it. And so I wasn't surprised when I saw it. But I wish I had the book near me. Not really a friend, but an acquaintance of mine, Mitch Horowitz, who's a scholar of occult history. He has a great book called Occult America, in which he goes back through the history of spiritualism into the modern New Thought movement and how one gave birth to the other. But he actually talks about the Fox sisters and how actually the renunciation of their gifts, that apparently they renounced it, that actually later in life they recanted their renunciation. So there really isn't any evidence that what they did was purely false. So that alone is, anyways, that's
Yeah,
another
well, they
story.
got so attacked that they just said, you know what? Sorry,
Right.
you know what? Done.
Yes, exactly. But I think this, and I'm not gonna like claim I'm prophesying, but I will say, because of the sweetness of their spirits, because of the gentleness with which they conduct themselves, even their response video, which I did watch, there was no real defense of themselves. There was just a sweetness of, hey, what we do is genuine. We're not lying to you guys. It was almost like, why would we do that? You know what I mean? So there was no need to go overboard proving, because
it's not even hardwired in
it
there.
was absurd for them to even think that, right? For that reason alone, I do think they will be very publicly vindicated in some way, shape, or form. And I can't say how that'll happen, but I know people who are that way spirit has their back.
Yeah.
It just works out that way. And
Yeah.
wish no harm on anyone. I simply wish for people to see this manifest right in front of their eyes in a way that's undeniable. So, anyways, but on the whole empathy thing, and hey, if you ever talk to him, by the way, please let him know that I have been praying for them for the last week because it's been so heavy on my heart. Even though I don't know them personally,
But you know them through me.
Yeah, absolutely. But I knew we were kind of going to go the empathy route today. And as we were talking, I've been thinking about some stuff. And as you were talking, I had a verse from the Jewish Psalter or the Psalms come to me that I often refer to when I'm thinking about empathy and how and why we lack it. And it's from the Psalter, from Psalms 115, 3 through 8. And it says this, and again, this is coming from, Jewish tradition. This might not be your tradition, but we can interpret it according to where we are. It says, "Our God is in the heavens. He does whatever he pleases, but their idols are silver and gold, the work of human hands." Now, I know we have people from a variety of religious traditions watching, so don't take anything offensively here. Think of this more in psychological terms, that these individuals have a specific God concept, and then they're looking at the God concepts of other nations, and they're kind of drawing a distinction between how they do things and how these other nations do things. And so they have a vision of God that is not tethered or tied to an object. Their vision of God is more universal, up here and out there. And they're looking at the gods of these other nations, and they see them as being tied to physical objects. And there's an obvious parallelism being drawn here. They say their idols are silver and gold, the work of human hands. They have mouths, but do not speak, eyes, but do not see. They have ears, but do not hear, noses, but they do not smell. They have hands, but they do not feel, feet, but do not walk. They make no sound in their throats. Those who make them are like them, so are all who trust in them. And so one of the psychological ways of teasing out the implications of this verse is to see that for the one writing, the highest principle, God, was something that was dispersed. It wasn't something that was localized in an object, let's say, but it was something that was more universal. The critique of the idol, don't think of it necessarily in terms of having an object that you venerate, but the critique was that our vision of God is something that's universal and dispersed. It's in and through all things. It lives and moves and has its being through all of us. It's consciousness that we're all participating in. Whereas these other visions and versions of God are trapped in one moment in time, right? They're idols, if you will. They're trapped in a moment. They're carved out of stone or gold or silver or whatever. And so there's no real. They have eyes but don't see. They have hands. They can't feel, right? Whereas the vision of God the psalmist is putting forth is one that feels, one that emotes, one that feels with us, one that is part of our lives. Whereas the vision of God he's critiquing is one that does not feel, cannot emote, cannot empathize. And then he says, those who worship them or those who serve gods of this kind become just like them. And so, if you serve a vision of a higher principle, whatever that is to you, that itself is unempathetic, you become exactly like it. You have the capacity to feel. You have the capacity to see and hear and understand, but you don't, because you become just like that which you posit as being the highest principle. And I got to say something. One of the things that I've noticed, I've been highly critical, of organized religion, fundamentalist Christianity in particular. But I was talking to someone the other day and I was like, all of that's still true. All of that remains true. However, if I was in a tight spot, I would still probably rely and depend on some of those people from my past more than I would on some people who maybe are more in my present. Of course, not you, but some individuals I'm connected with. And I thought about why. I really thought about why. And I realized it's because so many lack empathy. Because there is no longer this numinous principle to which they're tethered and tied that comes with I won't say baggage, but that along with it comes these calls to compassion, that along with it comes these calls to put yourself in the shoes of another person, think about what it's like to be them, empathize. Prayer was a regular practice of our lives back in the day, and part of praying, we were taught intercessory prayer 101, is when you go to pray for someone, you put yourself in their shoes. You imagine what it's like to be them, what it's like to feel what they're feeling, and you take on the burdens that they're bearing. And I mean, this is one of the kind of mystical practices of Christianity, is that you
Right.
attempt to take those burdens on yourself, to take them off of them and take them onto yourself. And practices like that wire you to think about people, again, even if you're a fundamentalist, kind of Bible thumping person, you you might say, I don't agree with what they're doing. You might even think they're going to hell.
Mhm.
But if you spend time praying for a person and putting yourself in their shoes, you can't help but develop empathy for that person and compassion. And it's not a faux thing, it's not a fake thing, it's very real. And so when I exited that particular version of Christianity and found myself in another version of Christianity where they took things like prayer less seriously and thought of them more in terms of metaphor, I realized that there wasn't a practice like that present. It was kind of all using the scriptures as metaphors for how to enact, justice and societal change, and all of that's good and fine. But there wasn't a meditative spiritual practice that we participated in wherein we put ourselves in the shoes of another person and thought of what it would be like to be them, and thereby gained and developed empathy for them. We had a vision of God that was like the idols the psalmist critiques, unfeeling, unempathetic. The only thing it can do is identify what's wrong with you. And, right wing Christianity versus left wing Christianity, they look very similar. It's just the things they say are wrong are at different ends of the spectrum, but it's
Mhm.
the same thing, right?
Yeah.
And one will condemn you to hell, and the one will cancel you on social media. But I mean,
Yeah.
they both do the same thing. And it's that lack of empathy. It's the highest principle in your life. You're not connected to that, and there's not a meditative practice in your life where you actually sit and put yourself in the shoes of another person. The Quakers have a statement that an enemy is simply someone whose story you don't know yet.
Well,
Hit on that a lot. Yes, please.
no, I was just gonna say, I'm sorry, I'm making notes in soul school as you're talking. Uh,
Mm.
there's just this something about when people start seeing negative comments, negativity. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
there are some that are completely turned off by it, and then there are some that are compelled to pile on.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that for me, that's that cognitive dissonance that
Mm-hmm.
I can't quite wrap my mind around. And I had made a couple of notes about, paranormal investigation is not supposed to be about character assassination.
Yeah.
And a lot of the commentary that they've received, from what I've been told, because like I said, I haven't looked at a single word of it, nor will I,
Yeah.
because I don't want to get any more pissed off than I already am. I want to be able to take the high road and, more light, less heat, which is what I
Mm-hmm.
called the special episode of A World Awakening. But there seems to be this thing that kicks in that's kind of mob mentality,
Absolutely. Yeah.
you know, uh, and kids seem, well, what I consider kids, seem particularly susceptible to it. That bully syndrome,
Mm-hmm.
where they come across a fight in the schoolyard, and the weak kids getting beat up on, and they feel like they need to jump on into the group that's beating up the weak kid, because for some reason, some way, somehow, that makes them feel strong,
Yes. Yeah.
um, or cool, or whatever. Now, I am going to go back just a moment.
Yes.
And if we're going to do this on some kind of a timeline, what I'm really afraid of is that these kids were never taught
Mm.
that bullying was not okay.
Yeah.
These kids were never, parenting is role modeling,
Yeah.
good, bad, or ugly. Whatever they see, they emulate.
Yes.
And I'm afraid that the real shift that has taken place in recent years in our society is the hateful, vitriolic, a lot of it political,
Mm-hmm.
But that, of course, spreads like manure through the garden of a family. And these kids are seeing a lot of hatefulness,
Mm-hmm.
hearing a lot of hatefulness, uh, and emulating what they're hearing because nobody is teaching them, whether it be at school or at home,
Mm-hmm.
particularly at home, that kindness counts,
Right.
that what you put out in the world comes back to you.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I'm not asking every parent in America or around the world to, suddenly have their great awakening and go all new age. I'm just talking about basic human decency.
Mm-hmm.
And who's teaching these kids not to pick on the weaklings,
Yeah.
not to speak ugliness
Mm-hmm.
at every opportunity, not to pile on
Yeah.
to the crowd of harm doers, to step back and to be a role model for their own peer group and
Yeah.
say what you're doing is wrong and step up and say, stop that. That will come back to get you. Stop it.
Yep.
This is just unkind. Um, what happened to the parents that taught kids to be generous of spirit? Now I know that next Thursday morning, when I turn on the television and I watch the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade, and I see thousands of kids who are working together in a team. They're in the marching band. They're all dancers. They're playing music, musical instruments. They're all singing together. They're all dancing together. And, and you see that there is some semblance of decency left in the world. But I think that it is incumbent upon how many of the kids that have piled on to Cody and Satori, how many of them have parents that even know they're doing that,
Yeah.
that even know that they're doing that? And I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that what Erin calls the interwebs
Mm-hmm.
traps us, sucks us in to the vortex. And we can post anonymously, we can threaten anonymously, we can put whatever ugliness we want to out into the world
Yeah.
without even having to put our name to it, not even
Mm-hmm.
own it, which I think is just an act of cowardice.
Yeah.
Um, but I'm trying to walk a line, Jeff. I'm trying to walk a line. I don't want to do to their detractors what they're doing to my friends.
Right. Right. And that's the thing, isn't it? That's the difficult thing. It's
Don't
I
feed the
think
beast,
right.
Don't
That,
feed the beast.
and there's a quote from Simone Weil that hatred is like a currency that passes from hand to hand until someone decides to just simply stop passing it on. You
Right.
know, and we can we can receive hatred and transmute it into something else, but until we stop passing it around, it will continue to pass around and it gains momentum. And that's why injunctions like turn the other cheek are meaningful, not because you're giving yourself over to abuse, but you're stopping that
Yeah.
vibration from passing on. You're absorbing it and you're doing so in a way where you can handle it. You can take it on and you can transmute it into something else. And actually, I won't go into it, but the history of that particular practice of turning the other cheek is actually sort of a protest. It's a way to say, I won't pay you back in kind. I will resist in a nonviolent way, but that resistance also speaks to some very powerful cultural things of the day that also would have, anyways, um, had an effect on the perpetrator. But you're very correct about the internet and what it does to us, because we're all, look, back when I was a kid, the internet was just coming out. Bullies were a specific class of people. We even had stereotypes of what they looked like, how they talked. Bullies in all the old cartoons and
Yeah.
movies all looked a
Trolls. Yep.
certain way. Yeah. Nowadays, anybody and everybody can be a bully, because the internet has allowed all of our inner bully to be able to come out and play. And it kind of goes to show you that not everybody, it goes to show you that there isn't a bully class and a non-bully class. It just goes to show you that for the most part, people just don't have the opportunity to do it. But
Yeah.
the internet has become a bully pulpit for the masses. And now someone maybe who's being bullied in a physical way at school, for example, can get online and bully people who aren't real people to them. They're pixels, they're ones and zeros.
Right.
They're not someone who has real emotions. They're not real to them. And you would think all this face-to-face contact we have over the internet would cause our mirror neurons to fire and us to feel empathy toward one another, but it can also have the opposite effect, where that face just becomes something to us. Well, it's just like anything else. Your pixels, your ones and your zeros, and someone can take their wrath out on you and get online and say the worst possible things they would never say to your face in real life, lest fist meet your face. I mean, they would never do that in real life, but the internet emboldens people to be that way. And yes, it comes from a lack of empathy, an
Yeah, it's like
inability.
a hall pass or a permission slip to
Right,
be just
right.
as ugly as you could possibly be
Yeah,
and
because
not get caught. Not,
exactly.
do it anonymously so that no one knows it's you.
Right.
What does that serve
Mhm.
in some people? Why does it make some people feel uh, empowered?
Yeah. Well, I think, if you look at Girardian theory, if you look at any of the works of Rene Girard, he talks
Mhm.
it's mimetic theory. I just had a weird I sense, if there's anybody watching this and you're like 37 years old, and either you or someone in your life is experiencing something pertaining to bullying in some real way, whether it's you at work or a kid at school, I just speak to that situation right now to be rectified and resolved, and I speak peace over you as well. Okay. Um, that was just kind of came to me, and I wanted to say that. Um, yeah, so I think what it does for people is this: we are all. Gerard put forth the idea that early civilizations developed thusly: we all look at what everyone else has, we desire it, we want it. And so societies come to a point, this boiling point, where we're about to destroy each other, right? It's a war of all against all, because everyone is desiring what everyone else has, mimetic desire. And society comes to this point where we're all about to destroy one another. It's a potential war of all against all. So, what we do then, because internally we know we can't destroy our societies or our little groups, we find an object, we find a person, a scapegoat. Okay. We find a scapegoat that, in typically, they have characteristics that mark them in some way. In this
Mhm.
case, maybe a supernatural gifting, as in the case of Cody and Satori, or just extreme kindness and love and sweetness and empathy, right?
Mhm.
Something that marks them out as being a little bit different from the rest of their generation in a lot of ways. So that's a defining feature, right? Actually, Gerard says in It's Either Violence and the Sacred or The Scapegoat that the scapegoat was traditionally someone who was not traditionally beautiful. You know what I mean? What someone might say ugly, but I don't want to say that. But that might have been why they were chosen, or it could have been that they were exceptionally beautiful. Either way, that's what a scapegoat truly usually was. And then
Mhm.
that war of all against all would become a war of all against one. And in taking out that one target, there would be this sort of catharsis, this magical sense of catharsis, because we all gathered around one object, we poured out our wrath and our angst on it, and for a moment, we feel cleansed. We feel better because all of this collective angst and violence we had, we vented onto this one person. We feel better. Well, it doesn't last long. And eventually, you have to find another scapegoat. Over time, this practice became sacralized, and we created a
I was going to
priest
say the
class.
sacrificial lamb. Yep.
Exactly. And so that is, in Girard's theory, where sacrifice originates, right? And it's universal, it's all across the globe because human beings are very similar. Now, his theory, and he was actually a radical atheist until he started thinking about this, and he eventually converted to Catholicism, though a more philosophical sort of Catholicism, was
More
that
Jesuit.
he saw that Jesus was the one sacrifice that comes back, right? and does not pass the currency on, let's say, that comes back and says, hey, I forgive you, right? And in offering that forgiveness undoes the whole system. And he actually traces how both human and animal sacrifice historically started to unravel and deteriorate from about that point in history on, which is just an interesting phenomenon. Whatever the case, the point is this: that is how we function, right? And think of all the angst, all of the ennui, all of the just negative vibes that people are cooking in all day, every day. Look at the stuff that's going on in the world. You know, we're bombarded with negativity, death, violence, terrorism, war. I mean, we're everywhere.
Destruction.
Like coming out of a 2-year pandemic where people didn't, I mean, all sorts of just craziness going on. And it isn't necessarily that it's as worse as it's ever been, but we're seeing it more than we've ever seen it before.
Right.
And so that negative vibe is there. And there is this sense of, if we can't forgive, we at least have to find a scapegoat. And the internet is a great place for doing that, right? Because there's vulnerable people out there who are putting their gifts out there, who are putting themselves out there, saying this is what we have to offer. And they're doing it innocently and in kindness and love, like Cody and Satori. And those people, because they're the best kind of people, are always targets for, I won't say the worst kind of people, but for the sort of people who have given into their worst impulses, right?
Yes. Yes.
And that's why I think what they did was such a beautiful manifestation of the Christ that lives in all of us, in how they responded, because there was this simple, I that made me respect them more than anything I've seen them do. Their response that was just sweet, matter of fact, to the point. It wasn't bring out the camera crew and let's prove.
Yeah.
It was.
No,
It
they have nothing to prove.
wasn't.
They proved it long
No,
ago
and that's the
to
thing about
anybody
genuine
that
people.
matters.
Yeah, it hurts when you're a genuine person to be criticized, but a genuine person also won't feel the need to say, "Okay, come out and scrutinize my life and go through everything with a fine tooth comb and let me prove to you definitively," because there is this inner assurance.
Yeah.
I have nothing to prove, and Spirit has your back. If you've encountered the reality of the supernatural the way that they have and the way that we have, when you have nothing to prove, ultimately that the wind is at your back, right?
Yes.
And so what they did and how they did it, I think, is a beautiful example to all of us, to offer forgiveness, to even say to their detractors, thank you. Thank you for offering helpful critique. I mean, it was beautiful. It was a beautiful response from hearts that I'm sure were hurting, because it
Yeah.
hurts to receive criticism like that. I've received my fair share of it from the
Here, me
Christian
too.
community,
Yeah,
for
except
what
I
I
don't
do.
care. I
Yeah, no.
don't care.
And I've come to
You know
that
what I
point.
know.
Yeah,
But
and
there's
I've come to that point too, but it still hurts like hell when it's coming from people that it's your heart to help, right?
Yeah.
People that you love and
Yeah.
you're really only trying to help. And then you get, like you said, you get piled on and you get whatever, verbal Molotov cocktails thrown through your windows. It's painful. But the
It
way
is.
they responded, they could have stoked the fires had they come at it guns blazing, but instead they just come with this disarming presence of, hey, this is who we are, and what more can you say and what more can you do? You got to let your gift vindicate you. The proverbs say your gift will set you before kings and open doors for you. It's not your defense of yourself. It's not posturing, and even, I mean, look, people like yourselves and other people of influence who know them are like, hey, we're not gonna let this happen. You come around them and lift them up, and they're not trying to do it themselves. I mean, that's beautiful, and that's a testament to who they are, and it's also a testament to how we should walk through life,
Well,
right?
I really do think that it was time. I was so upset about what was happening to them and how hurt they were. And, I couldn't help but feel it. But to see how they've handled all of this with such grace. I mean, they're just everything they're just elegant. I mean, they are mature well beyond their years. They have an innate understanding of human frailties and flaws. And both of them put themselves out there without regard to how it could blow back on them, because the message is more important
There
to
you
them
go. Yep.
than anything. And I can completely understand, because that's the same for us. It's the reason that we do this show.
Yep.
The message, not
Yep.
the messengers, the message is so important. And I do believe that, I mean, when I'm physically around them, when they're doing a session, you can feel the electricity in the air. You
Yep.
can literally see and feel, well, at least I can, uh, the magnetism and the magic of it, magic being science we don't yet understand.
Mhm.
But I think that ultimately they will prevail,
Mhm.
because they have nothing to hide.
Yep.
They're not lying to anyone. There's nothing fraudulent about either of them. They're the most genuine, authentic, loving souls. I can't wait to introduce you to them, Jeff. I'll
Yes.
make sure to get you to the farm one way or another, so that you can see and feel what they're doing, which is life altering. I lived long enough to see someone do this, and it just happens to be two people that I know and love deeply.
Yeah.
How lucky, how fortunate for me. But anyway, I would encourage everyone out there, as we always say, to be the light that you seek, to
Mhm.
teach your children well, to show them, that it's, you know, get them a puppy, for God's sake. Show them how it feels so good to be kind and
Mhm.
to take care of another living creature. Whatever it takes to instill that kind of gentility into those that you are raising. The old Cherokee adage about the two wolves fighting in the inside each of us, and the grandson asks his elderly grandfather, well, if there's two wolves fighting inside of us, which one wins? And the
Yeah.
grandfather says, the one you feed.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
feed what is good and kind and pure and essential to what will eventually and inevitably raise all of us up into our own spiritual ascension, so that we can find forgiveness in our heart. And I'll close on this note. Thank you to everyone who has stood up for them, everyone who gave them the benefit of the doubt. So many people that have been there for them. It means the world to both of us. And we are out of time, my darling. I'm getting messages from our producer.
Yep.
So be the beacon. Be
Mhm.
the beacon. I love you. I'll see you. I'll call you this weekend.
All right.
Okay.
Peace. Class dismissed.